computer. Welcome back to the main hall and the main track session here. I think we experienced two excellent track A and B sessions. Personally, I enjoyed very much the moderation and also the presentation, moderation made by Sissel, and I'm sure that Marianne Holmer's also moderation went very well. We are back on one track, and until lunch we focus on one of the big core challenges left from yesterday, where one of the conclusions were energy system transformation is progressing. So let's focus much more on transportation and food farming and habits. Not that it's all done, but let's really give attention. We have, I think in track B, just learned that technology solutions merged with cities as a playground is excellent for demonstrating first low volume, but then also speeding up solutions. And actually, Henrik, this is also, I think, the blend or the mixture, the components that you will be playing with. A few words about you before we hand over the floor. You have a PhD. You are an expert, indeed a specialist in transport, have worked, I think, your entire life in transport, grown up in technical solutions and society solutions with the Denmark Technical University, but also worked with the Ministry of Environment, focused on transport. For several years, you have been with the green think tank Concito, also the transport senior advisor and expert, and that's definitely why we have asked you to take the seat here and help us with the moderation. There will be all other speakers from society, from also representing technology. The floor is all yours and the speakers. Henrik, please take us into green transportation.
Thank you very much for that nice introduction, Peter. I will share my screen. Hopefully you can see it now. Not yet, maybe. Which is the program for this session on smart green transport solutions. It's a great pleasure for me to be invited to the Sonderborg Climate Neutrality Conference here and to speak about and listen to my favorite topic, which is green transport. As Peter mentioned, I'm from a green think tank, and we work a lot with the municipalities developing climate action plans, but also with other sectors and actors in society, including in transportation. So with me today for this session, I have three excellent speakers, which will cover different aspects of transport. First, we have Niels Rytter from the Southern Danish University, and he's an associate professor, and he will focus mostly on solutions in the maritime sector. And then we have Janus Tam, who's a project manager in Tartu municipality in Estonia, and Juan Carlos Escudero from the Environmental Studies Center in the Spanish city of Vitoria-Gasteiz, and they will both speak more about urban transport solutions. But as a warm-up, let's just have a look at the transport sector from a global perspective, which is not necessarily a very positive one, because what we see is actually that emissions from more or less all branches of transport on a global scale has been rising quite a lot over the last 20 years. This one does not include the effects of the COVID pandemic, but most expect that the growth patterns would soon reemerge in most of those sectors. So both passenger transport, freight transport, maritime aviation has been growing in terms of emissions quite a lot. If we look at Europe, we see now that transport is in total actually now the largest emitting sector. If we both include domestic transport, in the European Union, and also the international shipping and aviation moving out from Europe. It will become now the largest sector, overtaking energy supply. If we not are able to turn these trends, we will not have a chance to solve the climate crisis. Transport is many things. This is another graph from the European Environment Agency showing the differences in climate performance across different branches of transport. On the left side, we have passenger transport, where we can see and rail and maritime are the most climate efficient modes. They are at the bottom, whereas flying and passenger cars have higher average emissions. This is not a big surprise, but it is still, I mean, this is today after we had many years of technical development and attempts. And on the even more clear on the right side, we have a strong difference in the freight sector. Flying freight around is really climate inefficient, where again we have aviation as the worst part, but also heavy goods vehicles polluting more than rail and maritime sector. Take a broad and global view on the different kinds of strategies and approaches that are proposed to help solve this problem. You can see there are three streams or strains that we need to combine. One of them being to avoid and reduce the need for motorized travel to the extent that it's possible through measures like urban planning and even things like working from home. We can see that if you can avoid some of those trips, it will reduce the emissions from travel. We also need to shift as much transport as we can from the most polluting to the more environmentally friendly modes. For example, shifting car traffic to public transport and bikes in cities, but also shipping freight from heavy goods vehicles to maritime and rail to the extent possible. But this is likely not enough. We definitely also need to work on improving the technical systems we have, the fuel economy, the kind of fuels that are used, the electrification of transport, but also the more efficient operation of the whole transport system, the motorized transport system, through digital solutions and other measures. The European Union has recently issued a number of major sort of bold plans to start solve or address at least some of these issues. The smart, sustainable and smart mobility strategy from last year talks about getting 30 million zero-emission cars in operation before 2030, talking about cities becoming climate efficient and climate neutral, also talking about automated mobility and zero-emission marine vessels. And now more recently, the Green Deal, the Fit for 55 package, actually sets a goal to cut emissions from transport by 90% in 2050, which is a long way to go still, but at least it's for the first time a really, you can say, ambitious climate target here, and proposing various measures at the European level and national level. It's all very interesting to see what the European Commission is proposing, this broad set of measures, but a lot of the action here is going on, almost all of the action is going on a local scale, you can say, and this is why we have also seen bigger and smaller cities emerging as key players in the climate policy agenda, starting with the C40 cities, which is this major group of global big cities, coming up with the goal of, we can say we can contribute 40% of reaching the Paris Climate Agreement targets at the city level. So all cities should actually make Paris compatible climate plans. We see major cities, for example, in the northern region, coming up with ambitious goals. And even here in Denmark, we now have almost all of the municipalities agreeing to the same agenda. Cities like Sonderborg moving forward and developing climate neutrality action plans. And that's quite unique. We have almost all the cities here now. And this is interesting with the smaller cities because so many people, so many businesses are actually taking place, not necessarily in the huge cities, but in the small and mid-sized cities. More than half of the population live in these kind of cities in Europe. And we see organizations like the Polish, which is the collaboration on transport between European cities, now starting to focus on what small and medium-sized cities can do, what kind of discussions they can have and how they can help promote this agenda. A lot of the talk in this area has been about, as you can see in this image, all the interest goes to electric cars when we talk about a climate-friendly transport system. But there's so much else to do, and this is some of the presentations that we will now have will actually focus not so much on electric cars because that's only a part of the solution. We know also need to see things happening in public transport and in other modes like rail and maritime. So in the end of the session, I hope we can discuss a little bit across some of the presentations, some of these topics I hope to bring up when we come so far. What are the most effective solutions and what can be done at the local level with small and medium-sized cities and even small and medium-sized enterprises, and what kind of support do they need to make a difference. But now let me hand over to Niels Rytter, who will give a presentation on digitalization as an enabler of sustainable shipping. And he is from the University of Southern Denmark, based in Sonderborg. Please, Niels, the floor is yours.
Okay. Hello, can you hear me? Am I coming through?
Yes.
Very well. Yes, thank you.
Okay, so now I can share my presentation. Is that correct? Yes. Okay. So, as Henrik mentioned, my name is Niels Gorm. Can you see my presentation also, just to confirm also?
Yes, we see it.
Good. Okay, so as Henrik mentioned, my name is Niels Rytter. I'm head of section and associate professor at University of Southern Denmark. And I'm heading a research group where we are running a number of projects together with the Danish or international shipping industry, where we are working on making the shipping industry more digital, but also more sustainable and competitive. And what I will present for you today is an insight into some of the results that we are in progress publishing from a project we have done over the last soon 4 years, aiming at making maritime processes more eco-efficient via digitalization. That's why the title is Eco Digi, Exo Digi. I will take you through an agenda here where we will talk a little bit about the different sustainability pathways that there are for shipping, and then we will make a small deep dive into the topic of digitalization. I will show you one of our 3 cases we have been working on, which has been done for the island ferries, and then I will explain a bit of the results and learnings we have developed so far, and outline the next steps for our research effort. Talking about shipping, I think you gave a good introduction, Henrik, to some of the challenges that are coming up for transportation, and they also apply for shipping. Shipping has to make up its part of the gains or savings or reductions in emissions. And as you know, we have something called the International Maritime Organization that outlines the playing field for international shipping, you can say, in that respect. And we also have EU that pushes for targets and regulation for the shipping industry. Talking about how to make shipping more sustainable, then of course we need to follow a number of pathways. There is likely not only one pathway, but several, no? And you are all aware of the effort that is done now to increase the use of renewable energy. And when we talk about ships, we talk a lot about electrification of small ferries, as an example, working vessels, and also green fuels. Can be hydrogen, can be power to X, electrofuels like methanol, ammonia, and so on. These are, of course, coming up as the big enablers of sustainable shipping in the long term, because it will take some years or at least a decade or more before these all these solutions are available in a scale where they significantly will impact the emissions of shipping. So we have to do a lot in between. And what comes up here are other technology options like changing design of ships, using energy efficient technologies. Digitalization and automation comes up as an enabler of that also. Then there is a lot about creating awareness, trainings, and building skills of people working in the industry, whether we are on the port side or on the ships, you can say. Business and trade models sometimes also have to change, so it doesn't become attractive to speed up the vessels just to make up for a commercial agreement you have, though you actually don't need to be at port at that time anyway. And then the big thing is regulation and taxation, where you listed some of the elements that are coming into play in the coming years, like the emission trading scheme in EU and bunker tax on fossil fuels. what we will look on here today is not all the technologies. You know that at least a number of Danish shipping operators, ship owners have committed to building of vessels in the coming decade that will use the green fuels, and so that is on its way. We also know that a lot of shipping companies now are looking on all kind of design options. You can use lubric air bubbles under the hull, for example. You can use rotor sails and other technologies that can reduce the energy consumption on board. But where we deep dive into is the digitalization and automation domain now. There are many digital solutions that you can apply to a ship. You can, for example, gather data from your ship operations and optimize your cleaning of the hull and the propeller. As you know, ships, they get fouled over time, especially when you sail in warm waters or you lay still in the port. And if you clean the bottom of the hull and the propeller, or you paint it with a performing paint, then you can actually save a lot of fuel on your vessel. No? And to be able to optimize that process, you need to have digital solutions and data from your ships on speed, wind, weather, fuel consumption, RPM of the engine, and so on. There are also other application areas for digital applications to be used on vessels. You can monitor your equipment performance. When we talk about equipment, we talk a lot about the very powerful main engines and auxiliary engines that are on board ships. You can optimize the use of a cargo plant on board. You can optimize port calls. It's actually quite crucial that ships stay very short time in port, because the more time they have on the sea leg, the more they add value for the investments that are made into them, but also the more they can slow down the speed. And there is this cubic relationship between vessel speed and fuel consumption. So if you double your vessel speed, you are 8W your fuel consumption. But our project has been aiming at diving further into the mysteries of digitalization, because how do we make shipping digital? And we set out to develop some methods and frameworks that could support shipping companies in addressing these issues in a more systematic manner, because it's not just about buying a sensor or beginning with cloud computing or AI. There is a lot more that needs to be worked on. So we have developed a methodology that basically that we have basically applied and tested on 3 shipping companies as part of the project here, and for 3 different technology cases. The starting being the industrial processes, you can say, and the level of digitalization that was in place, because of course ships have been digitalized over the last 2-3 decades, so there are applications in place already. But more needs to be done. Then we set up some targets and what we call stretch targets for how far we wanted to improve operations of the ships and the eco-efficiency of these ships. And so we defined some KPIs and metrics that needed to be in place. Then where we have spent most of the effort is actually to identify and develop prototype digital solutions. So we have done that together with technology vendors and shipping companies, and we have implemented and tested those solutions in a sandpit scope, you can say. That means that we have rolled them out on selected vessels of selected routes to test the impact of them for a limited time. And then what is up to the shipping companies in the more long term is to basically track and evaluate benefits. We are part of that thing in the beginning here, but they have to take it over, and then they have to identify further improvement of actions to their operations. No, the logic is, of course, that you need data from ships to be able to improve your operations. No, and you can identify a lot of best practices that can lead to more energy efficient operations of the ships. Talking a little bit about digitalization. What is digitalization about? When you talk about digital ship operations, you must remember that there is sort of a long journey you have to embark on before you can make a home run. No, first of all, you need to have data capture from your vessels. You have to work with sensors and IoT devices on your vessels. No, you have to capture data from the bridge, but also the engine room. Maybe you need wind data, weather data, current data, all kind of data sources that you gather from ships and from other providers of data. On a ship, you need to set up some kind of connectivity also. So you need to get ships connected. If you sail in Danish waters, you can run on a 3G, 4G connection, no? But if you're out in the Atlantic Ocean, you need satellite broadband connections, and they are expensive also. And some places they don't even work well. So that needs to be in place and configured. Then you need to do data storage on board. You need to have a data logger on board that you need to set up. And you need to also, in principle, have an equivalent data storage on shore, because you have to send data on shore to a data warehouse or a cloud. Today, most of it is done in the cloud. And then you have to work on data cleansing analysis, because you get a lot of, let's say, less good data home from your sensors. You have to work on developing models that can visualize your data, but also do statistical analysis on your data. And at the end, you have to integrate those models in decision support tools that you have to integrate with other systems on board. And finally, you are maybe able to get the systems to be used in daily operations. This, of course, includes also convincing the people that operate the vessels or do operations in port that these tools are actually making a difference. And therefore, digitalization often becomes at least a 1 or 2, 3 year journey, depending on where you are and how mature you are at the outset. So that's important to bear in mind. And you can say our take on it has been to sort of advise, to be able to advise shipping operators, ports, and so on how and when they should, or when and how they should invest in digitalization, and how also to allocate resources to people, processes, and technology, and combine those efforts to make a difference in practice. One thing that is clear is that digitalization also needs to digitalization efforts need to be judged on the ability to make a return on investment for the shipping company. Of course, regulation is coming up. We need to cut emissions. That's one side of the cake. But we spend a lot of money investing in different digital components. Here is just a list of them. And in total, the build typically becomes a little bit bigger than you think. It's not just about hardware. It's about a lot of programming hours and so on. And it's quite essential that shipping companies know the payback time of the investments that they do, also because they are constantly exposed to alternative investment cases, business cases for different technologies. No? So we need to compare the investment also there. So that has been part of our project to do so. And then, of course, coming back to the sustainability dimension and the emissions, then we are of course out there to achieve some of these reductions in air emissions. When we talk about ships, they also have other kind of emissions, but we focus a lot on NOx, SOx, CO2 emissions. No, in our case here, the 3 shipping cases we have been working with have been the island ferries. We have 25 small island ferries sailing in the waters of Denmark on receiving public support from government and municipalities. We have Lauritsen, a more than 100 years old Danish shipping company that operates tank and bulk vessels. They have now been taken over or merged with a Singaporean company called BW Epic Hussein also. And then we had, here is a Swedish case, but then we had DFDS also that operate the large ro-ro vessels. DFDS is the largest ferry operator in Europe. And then we have a number of universities and technology vendors from Scandinavia, the Baltic Sea area, that has been part of the project. The case I will show you results from here is the island ferry case. So we have these small island ferries sailing to small islands in Denmark, and we have approximately 25 of those in Denmark that are not just operated on a purely private basis. And we worked with 3 of the routes. We have a small island called Sejrø out here. We have one called Orø here. We have Skarø, Drejø down here. And we have small ferries sailing to those routes. You can see today, it is so today that these ferries are actually fairly, let's call it, it's an older generation of ferries. None of these ferries are electrified. They are all running on marine gas oil. You can see 2 are sort of single-ender ferries. One is a double-ender ferry here, and they typically carry maybe up to 100, 200 passengers and 10, 20, 40 cars. No, But you could, of course, say let's just buy build and buy an electrical ferry, but the business case for that is also requires quite a lot of investments, and we set out to work with these ferries because we believe there was quite a lot to do still to reduce emissions from them. What we did was actually to go on board and make or sort of identify the level of digitalization that was in place. And what we typically could see on those ferries was that a lot of data and measurements were available on the bridge or in the engine room for the marine engineers and the navigators, but none of these data were logged. So it was actually impossible to do any systematic analysis of how fuel efficient these vessels were, and also to evaluate various ways of operating them and the impact on fuel consumption. No? So we actually had to work on getting measurement devices on board, all kind of measurement devices, flow meters to measure fuel, converters that could convert analog data to digital data, data loggers that we built and installed that were sort of able to read CAN bus, Modbus, NMEA standards, and so on. And then we actually got the data loggers installed on the vessels. We got a setup established where we send data to shore via a router, 3G connections, because all these vessels are sailing in Danish waters. Then we have a database in the cloud in Asia, and then we take data into the SDU servers, and then we have built in a previous project, my colleague Marie Lutzen has built an open source performance monitoring platform that we actually configured for the ferries that enable us to analyze the data, slice and dice the data in various ways.
Excuse me, Niels,
yes.
a couple of minutes left. Is that okay with you?
Yes, it's fine.
Okay,
so, so what has that enabled us to do? Well, that has enabled us to make analysis of the routes and the voyages we sail for the ferries. This is for one ferry sailing between Svendborg and Skarø and Drejø. Sometimes it calls Skarø when passengers have to picked up, you can say. And we have gathered data for this vessel here: wind and current data, navigational parameters, engine data, water depth data, and so on, fuel consumption data. And you can see here is a small look into some of the analysis of the data we have gathered for more than 1 year looking on the routes now. And we can actually look on the time spent in different modes for the ferry. How much does it spend maneuvering in and out of port? How much does it spend on the sea leg? How much does it spend on the sea passage, you can say. We can also look on fuel. No, most of the fuel is spent in the sea passage. And then we can compare the best and worst voyages. No, here you have the best and the worst voyage. No, as an example during the whole year. Of course, these vessels, they sail under different conditions when it comes to wind and weather. So we have to be more specific if we want to make up conclusions. No, and if you take an example here, then we picked actually 11 voyages between Skarø and Drejø where the wind was from west below 5 meters per second and the current was weak. And if you compare these 11 voyages, you can see the best voyage spends 77 liters of fuel and the worst 94 liters of fuel. So this of course gives some 18% difference in fuel consumption. And via data, we can here now start identifying, so how was this vessel then operated during those voyages, to be able to identify ways of improving the operation of the vessel. And you can say one of the things that really matter for small ferries sailing in coastal zones is whether you sail on what you call shallow water and or deeper waters. When you have sail on shallow waters and you do that on this particular part of the route, where there is maybe 2, 4, 6 meters under the keel of the vessel, then you are typically exposed to what you call a squat effect. So you are sucked down to the bottom of the seabed. No, this means that either you have two options: either you sail slower to consume the same amount of fuel, or you sail faster. And here we have 2 sailings where one is actually sailing half a knot faster than the other vessel on that particular part of the sea passage, and he consumes in principle 27 liters more fuel. No. So this is important knowledge, because by knowing this, we can actually and developing curves for the relationship between the water depth and this is here, this is the speed, this is the fuel consumption, and then we have different water depths. By knowing these relationships, we can actually advise the operators on how fast to operate the vessel on different parts of the sea passage. No, as an example. So that's the type of analysis we have done. As you can see, I mentioned that the relationship between speed and fuel consumption on a vessel is a cubic function. So here you have the function we have developed based on data, 1 year of data from this vessel here also. No, and you can see that if you just slow down your vessel 1 or 2 knots, no, from 10 to 9 knots on the whole journey, you go from 74 liters of fuel in consumption to 52 liters of consumption. So here also comes a question: do you want the journey to be 75 minutes, 65 minutes, 70 minutes, or 80 minutes? Actually, the choice plus minus 5 minutes can lead to 20% reduction in fuel consumption. And the funny thing here was that we looked into the voyages, and we could see that ferry operators, they sometimes arrived a few minutes earlier. I mean, just by cutting 2 or 3 minutes of your transit time, the transit time here is 65 minutes, you could actually save maybe 10-15% of your fuel consumption. And you can say, what have we then done to change things in practice? Well, what we have been working on lately in the project is to convert all these models and results we have, these data, into some apps or AI-based models that can give the operator advice on how to navigate the ship during the route of the vessel. You have 5 waypoints here on the journey from Svendborg to Skarø and Vejrø. And ideally based on historical data and the conditions on the day, an app would advise the navigator on how fast to sail the vessel on different passages depending on wind, weather, current on the day. And that would in itself be enable, you can say, more than 20% of fuel consumption. No, so that's actually what we have seen that can be achieved. Here is
I'm sorry, but we soon have to reach the conclusion. Not to take too much time from the other presenters, please.
Yes, I thought I had 20 minutes, but anyway, the business case, coming back to that, is that we can see that a small ferry like this one is able to actually cut at least 15% of savings, or cut 50% of its fuel consumption and thereby emissions. And the payback time of that, having calculated the investment to be done for an equivalent ferry, is actually at least in principle less than 1 year. If you take in practical considerations also, then it's actually 1 to 2 years of time you can spend investing in this, and then you will actually have saved then you have gained your investment back, and at the same time you have cut 15% at least of your emissions away. And we think that's a very good business case, both from the environment and also a financial perspective, economic perspective. No, so that's actually an example of what we have achieved in the project. Then we are, as part of the project, delivering a number of recommendations for the shipping industry and EU in general, and vendors also, on how they can contribute to make shipping more sustainable. And we can come back to that maybe at a later stage. But one of the things that is very key is that you get some digital standards in place for vendors and equipment providers and ship operators and so on, because whenever you don't have things standardized, you have to spend a lot of more money investing in technologies and programming hours and so on, and that costs money and makes the return of investment poorer for both the environment and the economic side for the shipping companies. I think that was it from my side. Sorry for taking a minute more here. That's it, Henrik.
Thank you very much, Niels. It's also because you have so much interesting stuff to present. I can completely understand. So I think it's really exciting to hear about all the efforts here. You're talking about a sector where, in a way, as I showed in my graph, is already fairly good from a climate point of view compared to other sectors, but there's still apparently a lot to do. And also a sector which is, it seems, very physical, the role of the depth and the construction of the hull and the weather and so on, all influences the performance, but you can still do a lot with being more aware of monitoring and measuring the performance and optimizing. I think that's fascinating. I had maybe one question at this point, if we can do that.
Yes.
But you already showed some results, but you had a graph showing this long journey of data through the digital chain, in a way, from collecting the data with sensors to using them in the other end, and things like that can sometimes make you nervous when you have a very long chain. I'm wondering, is it possible to actually do this? I mean, are there weak points in this digital chain that will be a barrier for optimizing this kind of data collection that you're doing? Where are the weakest points in the chain, and what do we most need to focus on if we want to make sure that the data collection actually enters into practice and can be used by ship owners and so on?
I mean, it's a good question. I would say the thing you have to be aware of is that you need to work on all parts of the data chain. I mean, all points can be weak, you can say, no. So I think that's why it's so hard and takes so long time also sometimes, no. But I would say a lot of it, I mean, a lot of it comes back to, at the end, the implementation of it. That was at the end of the chain. And that's where we must also invest in training and skill building of and at the end of the navigators, no. And at the end come the incentives. They were maybe not so much at the end of the chain, you can say, no. But actually, of course, we now deliver solutions to these island ferries that enable them to save their fuel consumption on at least, or have safe fuel consumption on 3 of the ferries. But whether they choose to do it or not is another thing. It depends on the incentives locally. What targets are put on the municipalities to reduce emissions? What targets are put, or incentives positively are put on the ferry operators, navigators to sail slower on that particular voyage, you can say that day? What benefits do they get out of it? I mean, they are quite interested in doing so, at least as part of our sea trials and pilots, but in the long term, this needs to be put in place to back up this effort. I don't know if it answers your question, Henrik, but that's what I see, because definitely technology is there, and it's a question of whether it's more or less expensive, but it's there, you can say, and you can achieve improvements. But if people don't use it and don't have an incentive to do so, then it lies still.
It's quite interesting because you're talking about equipment with a fairly long lifespan, like ships. I mean, you see, for example, in the freight sector on the land, you see new modern trucks. They have all these digital things built into them, but they also have a slow turnover. But when you have things that are more long-lived, like ships, it really makes sense, I would say, to start to optimize the use of the existing fleet rather than necessarily scrapping them, because they may just end up somewhere else in the world and pollute. So it's kind of, I think it's a very interesting approach that you try to improve what is already there by using these kind of digital solutions. I think it's very inspiring. I think maybe you can use that in other parts of transport as well.
And we usually say in shipping that the lifetime of a ship is 25 years now. So that's what you should be aware of, at least. And as you mentioned, Henrik, some of the ships are sometimes sold, especially these ferries are sold to other countries that use them 20 years more now.
Yes. So, thank you very much, Niels. And so please stay on for the final talk. Maybe we can have some cross-cutting questions in the end. And now we come ashore to a different context. We will hear now from Janus Tam, who is a project manager in Tartu municipality in Estonia. And he has been working on more than 15 years in the private sector before he became a project manager at the Tartu city government. And he's looking into public transport and also international cooperation projects and investment projects in this area. And the title of his presentation is Carbon-Free Public Transport, or Carbon Neutral Public Transport in Tartu. So please, Janu, go ahead.
Hello, good morning, everyone. I'm Janus from Tartu, and I'm working here as a project manager in the Department of Communal Services. I'm also part of a Smart and City project, where we are in together with city of Sonderborg and Victoria Gasteiz. And today I will give you a brief overview of our public transport in Tartu.
Janus, can you possibly show your presentation in full presentation mode?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, of course. So it's better now?
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. And yes, and what we are doing, and where we are moving in the future. What are our plans? At first, maybe some words about Tartu. Tartu is second largest city in Estonia. Our population is around 100,000. We are a university city, research and education center in Estonia, and thus our population is quite young. Almost half of our citizens are below 35 years. And of what we are also proud here in Tartu and in Estonia is that our people are quite skilled, and most of people are using internet and different ID possibilities and applications, and this is very good to implement new things and new applications here in Estonia and Tartu. But coming to public transport, first question is why we are dealing with this carbon neutrality and what's driving force here. There are basically two important things. Of course, first is climate change and the need to achieve a climate neutrality. So in Tartu we have such targets. But the second thing is modal share of the city transport system. For example, in Tartu, the share of public transport is rising, and thus also emissions from public transport. And in this graph, you see this is a yellow graph. During last 15 years, this popped up from 30 already on 46 or 47%. It means that annually the share of cars is rising by 1.5%. It's a very big trend, and we are a lot of worried about that. And now we want to turn it a little bit, not little bit, but we want to turn it back. And then one key to achieve this is to enhance and develop our public transport system. Also other modes, sustainable modes, I mean here walking and cycling, but the big role is also on public transportation. As Tartu is a relatively small city, our public transport system is also relatively simple. We have city buses here, and also on top of that, we implemented our bike sharing system. I will show it soon. We don't have yet trams or trolleys here, but yeah, we are thinking on trams as well. But today we have buses. We have in daily use 64 buses in our bus lines. And in 2019, we switched fully on gas buses. And in the beginning of 2020, already on the biomethane as well. We are very happy about this because our public transport system is 100% carbon neutral at the moment, and there are maybe not very many cities, same size cities in Europe who have 100% carbon neutral public transport system. We started this journey in 2011, where we partly switched on natural gas buses and just to pilot and to see how these applications are working and to build up also the infrastructure for filling stations, for example. And yeah, and then this was a very logical continuous to switch on biomethane in 2020. The more important is that this biomethane is locally produced. It's the plant is not in the city, but near the city. It's on the territory of municipality. It's 10 kilometers from here. And this is an agricultural plant in general. And as I mentioned, the second part of our public transport system is citywide bike sharing, which was established in 2019. Both our new buses came online in July, and the bike sharing was launched in June. We started with 69 parking stations in the city, and as the demand is growing and the usage is also very good, then we continuously are widening the system, and today we have already more than 90 parking stations within the city, and also some stations in the neighboring municipalities, and we plan to widen the system further in next years. We have in our system at the moment around 750 bikes, and three-quarters of them are electrical bikes. And this bike sharing system is running on green electricity from the beginning of this year. So this is also fully carbon neutral system. By today, which means that it's a little bit more than 2 years, the total distance traveled by bicycles is more than 6 million kilometers, and there is made more than 2 million trips already. And of course, the most active users are students and the school children, but not only. And when we are talking about decarbonization and climate neutrality, this is not the thing only renewables. We need to be more efficient and to provide more value for used energy. And this is why we improve also our public transport system further every day. And then one maybe most remarkable thing was done already in 2019 in Tartu, when we switched on new bus line system in the city. Previously we had 25 bus lines, mostly ring lines, and then the system was in work from 1990s. It's more than 20 years old system, and yeah, we started to design new system in 2016-17. We used a lot of data there. It was fully how to say scientific work and analytic. We used a lot of analytics. And finally, we defined 13 lines, mostly pendulum lines, and we got better frequency thanks to this. It means that our service level is higher than it was in case of a previous line set. And also of what we are very happy is that the number of passengers was increased thanks to this. And this is a great thing for us and gives us a lot of confidence that the methods we used in planning of a new bus line network were right, and we can use such methodology in the future as well. In connection to our existing bus lines, we are continuously piloting different other solutions to find better solutions for and applications for future. Because our transport, public transport system is built up on services. It means that we are procuring services. We don't have own fleet, and it's good to be aware pros and cons on different applications, and for that we are piloting different buses, and one pilot was done in 2019 and 2018 when we piloted throughout 1 year electrical bus. We created a special line for this in the city center area to connect coach station and railway station, and it was very useful pilot. At first, of course, we got a lot of positive feedback from public, from users. They valued very much this purity of electrical transport. It's less noise. There are no exhaust gases and so on. But what we also learned from this pilot is we had quite a lot of downtime days during this pilot, and the reason was that we didn't have dedicated maintenance and service for such application here in Estonia. I mean electrical buses, and there was some technical problems during the pilot, but repair works take quite a lot of time, as we need to invite technicians from Poland, for example. And that's a good learning point here when we are talking about new technologies and new applications. And at the moment in Tartu is going on also pilot of autonomous electrical bus. This is operated by company Auvetech, who have already also hydrogen autonomous bus there. And this pilot is going on real traffic situation. It means that we didn't any special regulations, and we started in the very end of August, and we will continue until the end of October. And this line is connecting two museums in the city. One is the City Museum and another is National Museum. And it's also quite successful, especially when we talked this operator. They are very happy that the bus is working better than they expected in real traffic condition. There are not remarkable problems, not remarkable technical problems. And this gives us confidence to create already dedicated line in the future, in the very near future, for such applications.
Okay, Janus, can you perhaps finish in a couple of minutes?
Yeah. I am quite close to finish already. And then this year there was approved our new climate and energy action plan, and in this plan also big part is dedicated to mobility and to sustainable mobility, and also to on public transport. And the main aim is to raise attractiveness of public transport in next years, and to find for next procurement period starting from 2029 appropriate solution for buses. And of course, Tartu is very willing to be one of the first 100 climate neutral cities in Europe. We are waiting very much for opening of this mission and want to partake in this mission. And some days ago, we started already also the process to pilot the hydrogen buses in Tartu. We are talking at first in 3 hydrogen buses, and about the production site and also about the filling station. In Estonia, we don't have any production, big scale production, and any filling stations yet. And if this application will be successful, then Tartu will be the first place in Estonia where hydrogen will be taken in use in larger scale. And basically that's briefly all. And if you have any questions, I am on your disposal. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Janus. That was a very nice introduction of various, actually quite different projects you've been trying out and implementing in your city. I think it's fascinating that you're testing these different technologies in this way. I would like just to ask a couple of questions to you. One of them is the first is about the biomethane system for the existing buses, which is sort of your first steps toward climate neutrality. It's just an issue we have sometimes with biomethane in terms of climate, that methane is also a powerful greenhouse gas. So I wonder if you have any monitoring system for leakage of gas from the system, not only for the buses, but maybe also from your supplier. It seems you have a local supplier of the biomethane. Do you have any procedures in place to make sure that there is a lot of leakage or escape of methane from that system? Because in the worst case, it can actually jeopardize some of the climate impact from the improvement you get from the biomethane.
Yes, no. From the city side, we are not monitoring these leakages, but anyway, in course of construction works and designing, there are already quite heavy monitoring going on from the state side. and I think in that sense there is no need to have additional monitoring system for that, and I'm quite confident and sure that the system is leakage free. Absolutely, but yes, we don't have such special system on top of that.
But that's good to know. Maybe we could learn something from your system, because we had some examples of not so efficient biomethane production systems in our country, and finding out that some of actually the climate. But this is also why it's interesting to look at some of the other technologies that you're into. Maybe just one more question is about things like the electric buses and even the electric bike share system. I suppose that your climate is quite cold during the winter. Do you experience any major trouble with using these kind of new technologies, electric systems or automated buses? Self-driving, but does this work also during the colder season of the year?
Yeah, we piloted this electrical bus towards the year, and then we had quite cold January during this pilot. In some days the temperature was below 25 degrees, minus 25 degrees, and there was no big problem. The only thing was that the energy used for heating was rising, and that's all. When we come to bike sharing, yes, that's true. Unfortunately, we need to take off electrical bikes from our system for cold winter. It means that almost 3 months they are out of the system, and we are operating only regular bikes during cold weather. Yeah, that's true. And this is yes, this is maybe somehow problematic, but to be honest, in case of deep snow, it's not very convenient to bike also, and most people are switching on public transportation for winter, and those who wants to bike, they can use regular bikes.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. One final question is about the 10% increase you experienced in the public transport system after you improved the network and so on. Did you monitor how many of those were maybe people who were previously driving cars, or is it just bicycles, or is it people driving more on the public transport than before? Did you look into this?
Yeah, of course, we are monitoring and we are gathering a lot of data from our mobility, and what we see that some people from public transport will switch on bicycles.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not bad itself, but it's not easy thing to get the people out of car, and then we got some, but maybe not so much as we want or as we plan to have, and this is of course the thing for this, what we need to work to rise at the attractiveness of cycling and also public transportation, and yeah, we need to. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, but thank you for looking into that and for sharing the experience. I think it would be interesting to follow some of your experiments in the future as well. So good luck, and thank you for this, Janos. And we will now need to switch to the last presentation from Juan Carlos Escudero from he's the head of the Information and Innovation Unit for Urban Sustainability in the city of Vitoria-Gasteiz in the Basque Country of Spain. And Juan Carlos is in charge of implementing and energizing innovative strategies concerning sustainable mobility, energy, and the fight against climate change. So please, Juan Carlos, you have the floor.
Thank you, Henrik. Good morning, everybody. The sound is on. It's okay? Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. Thank you, Henrik. Thank you also to the organization for this invitation to be part of this interesting panel this morning. Yes, I work for the Environmental Studies Center, that is a public agency of the City Council of Vitoria, that is one of the local partners at the city demonstration of the Smart and City project. Let me start with an introduction, with some basic facts regarding the urban context of the city of Vitoria. As you can see in this image, it has a characteristic urban structure, being a city with no urban sprawl. So it's very clear the border between the city and the rural landscape surrounding the city, and almost 98% of the population. It's a city of 250,000 inhabitants, but 98% of the people are living inside a 3-kilometer radius from the city center. So it's a city really flat, and definitely it's a city where everything is at hand, accessible on foot or by bicycle. Such an interesting urban structure has a clear impact on the urban mobility, because allows us to have a nice accessibility to the different daily services like education, sport, the health services, for shopping, and so on. And in a very short distance, it's a real a quarter of our city. Yes, because in only 10-15 minutes riding a bicycle, it's possible to go from the city center to the city border, and walking no more than 45 minutes. So it's nice. It's a nice contest to work with the urban mobility, and to use the urban mobility as a tool to fight against climate change, and within the energy transition strategy of the city. Well, but this urban contest comes from the past, because the city has tried to maintain this urban compact for decades, and the first pedestrianization started 40 years ago with the arrival of the democracy. And here in this image, you have the different areas and what has been the growth of the pedestrian areas in the city till today, where we have more than 500,000 square meters of pedestrian areas across the city. Here you have some images of the areas that were recovered from the traffic for the people. And what is true is that this growth of the city during the last century has been managed properly in order to avoid sprawling and losing this human scale city. But what is true is that, as has been the case in many cities, and for instance, that has been also the case in Tartu, has some tunnels before, we were really in a problem. Even having such a marvelous urban structure, we had this negative trend in the modal split during the last year, and at the year 26, we had this modal split with a clear growth of the use of the private car in a moment where we were really in a hurry. Yes, because at this moment we have approved a new master plan with a plan to increase in 8 years around 16,000 new flats, expanding the city in another 9 million square meters. So taking into account this negative trend, having in front of us this change, was really a challenge in order to maintain this human scale city and trying to avoid this negative trend in the modal split. This is the situation 10 years later, how has changed and how the population in the city center neighborhoods have decreased and many residents are coming to live to the new residential areas to the east and to the west. It was also a challenge from the point of view of our climate change commitments, and according to our climate change strategy, we stated that in order to become a carbon neutral city by the year 2050, that was the challenge we adopted some years ago. It will be needed to reduce in an important way the energy consumption for the transport sector down to 82% in order to be successful in this aim to become a carbon neutral city. Nowadays, we must be carbon neutral city by the year 20 because we have also the chance to become one of the 100 cities in the new carbon neutral city mission. This effort should be stressed. In order to accomplish this new strategy, has been adopted a new concept that combines public space and mobility policies that is no more than a new hierarchy in the main road network, trying to avoid through traffic in 80% of the streets in the city, trying to ensure the through traffic using only a concrete set of roads surrounding big neighborhoods that are what we have called the superblocks, trying to avoid the through traffic inside these superblocks, and this is the structure. So the final idea is to reverse the undemocratic where 75% of the public space nowadays is devoted to the private car. We started applying this new hierarchy, redesigning totally the public transport network from an old network based on 18 bus lanes, replaced by a totally new integrated grid of 2 trams and 9 bus lanes, with this new topology in order to improve the accessibility and the functionality of the network. We introduced this new design for the public transport network together with a new parking policy in the city center, part of a push and pull strategy, tripling the parking tariffs in the city center, plus increase by 30% the regulated area extension in the city center. The same day we implemented the new public transport network. Here you have the different interventions we are accomplishing in the different neighborhoods in the city in order not only to improve the mobility for different modes, but also in order to improve the public space for the people. This is the first superblock that was implemented, the pilot superblock in Sancho Xavier Street with the funding of the Civitas project. And here you have other examples, because having in mind this hierarchy is always possible if you have to renovate the pipes of the sewing system in a street. After that, to rebuild the public space according to this new hierarchy and what should be the aim of those streets, extending, enlarging the sidewalks or implementing new plazas for the people. Here you have different images of the different interventions we are trying to implement, but not only using expensive structural interventions, but also using tactical urbanism approaches, like this one that has been implemented during the COVID-19 process in the city center of the city, in a street that connects the city center with the campus. Or another examples in different neighborhoods where we are trying to implement this kind of low-cost approaches in order to calm the traffic and to give back the public space to the people. Well, this new hierarchy allows us not only to redesign the public transport network or to establish a new hierarchy for the road network, but also to implement in a functional way improvements for the other mobility networks, like for instance the pedestrian network, using mainly those inner streets in the super blocks where the through traffic has been avoided or it's being avoided, or for the bicycle network. Yes, the idea is not to have 100 of bike tracks, but to have a main network for the bike and trying to improve the safety for the riders using the bike in the inner streets within the super blocks, sharing the space with the cars in an environment where we have to counter the traffic. This is some of the results after the new redesign of the public transport network combined with the new parking policy. We have doubled the number of users of the public transport, even having into account that during those 10 years, we have extended the city to the east and to the west, according to the master plan, with nearly 50,000 new residents living in those new neighborhoods, and neighborhoods that are outside of the pedestrian scale in many times. And yes, we have reduced in an important figure the share for the private car. We have even increased slightly the pedestrian mode. We have increased in an important way the bicycle share and also the public transport. Anyway, we are trying to continue working in order to improve this mobility and public space policy. Here you have what are the plans for the new phases for the public transport network, with new tram lines to be implemented or being implemented now, and a new BRT, fully electric, that will start operating this winter with a 10 kilometers line, replacing the nowadays busiest vast lane of the city. That is the circular lane. Is the purple line that appears in the map. Here you have an image of this bus. This is the short one. We are going to have 13 new fully electric buses, 8 of them double ones, double size, and the new tram extension that started operating last winter to the university campus. But to conclude with my presentation, this approach of mobility and public space combination allows us not only to improve the mobility system, but also to support the green infrastructure in interventions and natural-based solutions that we are trying to implement in the city. Because it's this new redistribution of the public space is an opportunity to improve the connectivity among the different green areas inside the city, with a green belt surrounding the city, as a smart transition between the urban fabric and the rural area. Here you have some images of the interventions that have been implemented, like for instance in Avenida Gasteiz, where with a new redistribution of the public space, it has been possible to establish new public transport areas, new bike tracks, to extend the sidewalks, and even to dilate a former creek that was undergrounded when the new when this neighborhood was built 40 years ago. Here you have an image of this change, the before and after, and the new river that was dilated as a new green corridor connecting some part of the city with different green areas inside the city. And who knows if in the future it will be possible to connect this river even with the green belt. This is an idealization of the opportunity to implement such a pedestrian and active mobility, and why not also natural corridors between the city center and the different green areas across the inner streets in the super blocks, connecting the city center with the green belt. This is the idea, and one of the idealization in one of those neighborhoods that has been built during the last years. This is the idea where we are trying to implement some civic areas in spaces that nowadays are roads, in order to improve this connectivity, and also in order to avoid the through traffic inside the superblocks. And that's all. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm really open to any question that you could be interested to Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Juan Carlos. This was also a lovely presentation with all the green. It's very inspiring to look at. I would like to, it seems that I ask one question for you before we go to a general last round. It seems that you are introducing more green in the city while you are still having a high population density and a well-confined city, because that's sometimes a conflict. If you want a completely green city, you maybe also get urban sprawl and longer distances, but it seems that your strategy is rather to use some of the free road space for greenery without actually lowering the density, as I understand it correct. And this is very interesting if you are able to succeed with this. Can you say a little bit about how far you are with the super blocks? Have you only put one in place, or do you have several in place? And what's happening to the cars that are not allowed to be there? That's a question we sometimes ask ourselves with these kind of projects. Will the car just go away, or will they maybe drive somewhere else? Do you have any information about how far you are and what is happening to those cars that are not able to drive in those areas anymore?
Okay, thank you, Henrik. Yeah, you are right. Even being a really green city, yes, because we have more than 45 square meters per inhabitant of green areas, we consider that being a so compact city with 250,000 people living there, it's even possible to maintain this green infrastructure in the city, or even improve it in order to provide us a safer situation in front of the climate change challenges we have. Well, regarding the superblocks, yes, this formulation of superblocks is really a long-term strategy because we needed many money to be implemented, but not only it's a question of money, it's also a question of hardware, of software, how to manage the community engagement in order to accept this new formulation. And what is important, not to leave nobody behind, because yes, you always need to have in consideration what is the demand of parking for residents in some areas. Yes, we are trying to provide them alternatives to the use of the private car, but that don't happen from night to day. You need time, but in order to implement the different interventions in different neighborhoods in the city, we have almost completed the central superblock. We completed also the pilot superblock, and we have different interventions in different neighborhoods according to this concept. So it's a long-term approach to implement different interventions according to this scheme, taking into account the opportunities. Yes, because you have funding. For instance, nowadays we have the chance to present proposals for the next generation funding that will be launched the national government with the EU funds. And yes, the city is preparing many proposals in order to get the funding, in order to allow these interventions like those has been shown in this neighborhood to the west. So it's a long-term approach, and it's needed to be done together with the people. And I would like to stress that all this process has been established from the very beginning together with the community, with an intensive participatory process.
Excellent. That's very nice to hear. Thank you very much. And there's one question from Mike. Would you please ask your question, Mike Woodside?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for a really a great talk. I'm Mike Goodside from the University of Adelaide, so hello from Australia. I was curious, with all the greening, is there a balance between trying to ensure that there's airflow through the city to clean the city air, and perhaps also if you are using plants that through giving off organic vapors mixed with cars to cause smogs in even micro areas? It's really fascinating. And people with allergies, etc. These are some of the questions we're thinking about in Adelaide, where we have very strongly defined city canyons, and wondering if it's something you've looked at with your research and city plans. Thanks.
I'm sorry, Michael, but I have some problems with the sound at the beginning of your question, and I have no clear idea about what was the question. Sorry, I'm sorry.
I think the question was about the airflow through the city, whether you were able to work with that, so you can also reduce the impact for people with allergies and so on. Do you do anything to make sure there is a fresh airflow through the city?
I'm sorry, but the sound is not so good.
No,
sorry, Henry.
Okay, maybe you can send Michael. Maybe you can send Juan Carlos an email and ask about that specific question, because I wanted to have a final round, a final question, maybe for very brief now, because we have out of time for all the presenters, Niels, Janus, and Juan Carlos. It seems that you are working sort of with a local solution, that's all right, but I think all you have the approach that you need to combine different solutions. So I don't need to ask that question. But is there one thing that you would say from the local level, for example, the ferry operators Niels was talking about, for the cities, that you need from, for example, outside work, from the national government to help implement these kind of solutions? What is needed to help local actors develop green and implement green solutions? So that you can speed up your process. Maybe Niels, if you're still with us, do you have any clue to what is needed to make these initiatives that we mentioned with the digitalization, to make them implemented? Is there something from the outside that could help? Are you still with us, Niels? Maybe we lost Niels Pulver.
Anymore, sir.
Think so?
Niels is not here.
Okay, so Janus, are you with us? No, so you still have to talk to?
I'm
Do you have a response to this kind of question? What kind of support is needed from outside?
I think there is needed to have two major things. One is, of course, different incentives, and the second thing I think is which is also maybe the most important, is that regulations must be such that you can implement different solutions and pilot different solutions and so on. Usually the regulations are bigger obstacles than money, and this is maybe, I think, should do major things.
So sometimes you face regulations that does not allow you to do what you want to do. Is this the case?
Yeah. No, for example, in case of autonomous vehicles, it's a case at the moment, and yeah, there are sometimes some regulations which will not support needed achievements or needed developments. And of course, money is
but it seems that you are benefiting from talking with other cities. I mean, can you form like a common voice when you ask, for example, for changes of government regulations? Is it better to be more cities collaborating on these things rather than one city at a time? Yeah,
sure. Of course, it's important, and it depends, of course, on country. Estonia is a small country. It's here. It's much easier, I think, to do than maybe in Germany or in Spain or in Italy area. And we are in Estonia, for example. We have a quite good connection with the different ministries, and we are exchanging information, and we have regular seminars and so on, and yeah. Okay. They are consulting with us when they are working out new regulations or changing something, and we as a city are very active, and other cities also in Estonia collaborating on that, and yeah. So it's not good to be passive. You can do something yourself. That's good. Again, maybe similar question to you, Juan Carlos. Is there something from government or from maybe European collaboration that you need, that you think would be helpful to speed up the implementation, or can you do it all by yourself?
No, always it's welcome. The different ways of having support from the European Commission and from the European Union. For example, from the point of view of regulations, in order to support and to push the implementation of different policies that sometimes are not so popular, no? But in any case, it's not only a question of money, of having funding, that it's important. It's many times a question of governance, and to try to implement these sharing learning processes, trying to involve the community from the very beginning and trying to show them that these solutions are not a work of full people, that has a meaning, and that it's a way to have a better city for everybody. So support from the European level, yes. Regulations, I suppose is the best, and this way, this Green Deal approaches and the new regulations the Commission is trying to implement is in favor of this kind Excellent. Of strategy.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm sorry I have went over time here. It's my fault, but I would really like to thank the three presenters for showing examples of very interesting experiments going on. and also for being brave and trying new things and sharing with others. And at least for the two cities, I wish you good luck in the I suppose competition for the 100 climate neutral cities. Maybe we'll see there. And certainly I got some ideas for places I would like to visit in the future, both going by ferries in my own country, but also the beautiful cities that you presented, and the nice ideas. So thank you from my side, and again, sorry for taking too much time. And over to the organizers.
Yeah, thank you, Henrik.
Thank you.
Thank you, Juan Carlos, and thank you, Tatu, for sharing your experience. There's a lot of inspiration also for Sonderborg in listening, and I will comment later on this afternoon on my own observations and learning.